And there was one team that was really, really active. And it started before the weekend with a major trade. The Las Vegas Raiders have been spending and spending and spending. They've set some records, most notably Tyler Linderbaum, who reached an agreement with the Raiders yesterday on a 3-year, $81 million deal. It includes $60 million guaranteed, by far and away the biggest contract handed out to a center in the NFL. Of course, this on the heels of them trading away Max Crosby to the Baltimore Ravens for a couple of first-round picks, including this year, which is pick number 14. But the Raiders, led by Tyler Linderbaum, have set the standard of overspending in free agency potentially, and people may be looking back in next offseason and saying, yeah, you remember when they won the offseason? It didn't result in many wins, but they do get the best center in the class, maybe the best player available in free agency, if you listen to Pete Prisco, who talked about it last week. So the Raiders have improved their roster by spending an S-load yesterday at the start of free agency.
Yeah, I was to say, you know what this means, guys. Absolutely nothing. And that's how we love the offseason. A lot of hype, a lot of signings. In some cases, it'll pay off. But the truth of the matter is this, besides the Linderbaum signing, maybe you say Nakobe Dean and Quay Walker to help shore up the defense, most of these deals, they're going to be one-year deals, maybe 2-year deals at best. And a year from now, we'll be having a discussion about the team potentially moving on. That's how it typically works in free agency. If the player, and this is what's interesting about Linderbaum, is he's one of those players that you would have said, why would any team want to let him go? Clearly the Ravens, thought he was replaceable. Otherwise, they wouldn't let him get to free agency in the first place. Or it's just one of those tough decisions you have to make. And they look at the center position. They say, we want to invest and allocate our capital elsewhere. So it looks as if the Raiders want to be big spenders. They want to try to turn things around. They're trying to shore up their offensive line by bringing in Linderbaum. So they give him a record-setting deal for centers. And then you look at what they've done defensively. Nakobe Dean, Quay Walker, Kwity Paye. Malcolm Kuntz, who's they signed him to a 1-year deal. He's kind of been an up-and-comer player in my mind. Eric Stokes, they re-signed to a 3-year, $30 million deal. So the sort of thing you want to see. But, ultimately when you trade away Max Crosby to the Baltimore Ravens, I just, that's one of those moves that I understand his frustration with the team. I understand that, maybe they felt like that bridge was burned. There's no way they can go back to it. But I don't know how this makes this team any better. And it feels like, they're going to take Fernando Mendoza, number 1 overall with this draft pick. I think that this signals that too, with the Linderbaum signing. They added in Jalen Naylor as well to help out at the wide receiver spot. But the releasing of Geno Smith, everything that kind of coincides with this, it leads you to think they're going to take a quarterback with that first overall pick. But what kind of team is he going to be coming into? Probably still a team that's going to be one of the worst rosters in the league. And it's going to be an uphill battle for him. But, they're spending a ton of money, man. And I'm sure there are people in Vegas who love to see this. At least the team's trying to make this team better.
They are making a move to try to make the team better. They also probably did the right thing by, moving on from Max Crosby. Max gave them some really good years. And giving him an opportunity to go somewhere and maybe see if he can win seems to make a ton of sense to me. The Linderbaum, I just, again, I can't get around thinking that how important centers are to your team, for one. And then the fact that I just don't – there are a few good – yeah, actually, it's a good draft with centers and linemen this year, but I just don't think – I think the Ravens did not improve losing the best center in the league. I don't know what the Ravens felt about it to not franchise tag him, to not – I mean, they did offer him a nice amount. It just wasn't high enough. I just don't know. I don't know if this – I think this takes Baltimore's offensive line a major step back, which what does that mean for Lamar Jackson and this year if they don't find a way to plug that gap? And for the Raiders, I don't know what to think because I don't have high expectations for them to begin with. So it's very difficult to say that losing Max Crosby but gaining a center in Linderbaum made this a better team. I just think it's just a wait and see approach with the Raiders.
The story that came out, I think it was Diana Rossini who had it last week, and she was talking about, after they released Geno Smith, that the Raiders would like to find a veteran quarterback, that if they go the route of Fernando Mendoza, they don't want him to start right away. I don't I don't get it. If that's the plan, if that's what they're trying to do, I don't get it. You've got the number one pick. I would assume you'd rather find out sooner rather than later. And if you're going to improve the offensive line by going out and signing the best center, the best offensive lineman of the free agency class, and you give him that sort of contract, that seems to me like if Fernando Mendoza is going to be your pick at number one, then that would mean that I would want to start him right away. And just go with that and see what Kubiak can do and just go through the growing pains, but at least get an answer one way or the other whether or not he really is the quarterback of the future or the franchise quarterback. And so when I saw the Linderbaum signing, that just seemed more and more obvious to me that this is the direction they were going. And from the Baltimore standpoint, the reports are they offered him a $20 million deal. He passed. They offered him 22. He passed. He got a much bigger deal from the Raiders, but I guess it was the fact that Baltimore wanted a fourth year, and with this deal with the Raiders, it means he can get to another contract at 28. So I guess the sticking point was the number of years. But the fact that Baltimore, an organization that usually makes the right moves from a personnel standpoint, didn't franchise him and ultimately decided we'll just take our chances with him leaving. I just wonder what else is there, and I don't want to say overrated, but maybe they didn't see the value that clearly the Raiders did. I just, when an organization like that makes a decision to not retain a guy like that, when they usually always retain, their players, whether it's Hamilton and all these other great players that they've had over the past few years, it just makes me wonder what they didn't see in him that the Raiders and some others did.
It raises eyebrows, right? I mean, that's for a player that I think everyone looked at and said he's a great player, makes a lot of sense, and for them not to be able to work this out somehow. But I think it comes down to maybe a couple of things. The first would be, we talked about the contract situation, but also just the allocation of your salary cap and where you're willing to spend a little bit more and where you're probably willing to not. And as tough as it is to say, tackles in the offensive line are just valued at that much higher, maybe even more so, than even center and guards, and then even guards maybe even more than the center sometimes. So if you're looking at it from that standpoint, it could have been a philosophical difference of how they want to go about spending some of the extra money that when they can. I think the other thing that you have to look at is Lamar Jackson is no spring chicken, meaning he's a veteran in this league. When you look at the move that the Raiders are making, Clint Kubiak's bringing in a center who's going to help Fernando Mendoza with a lot of the calls they're making in the run game, pass protection, against a lot of the blitz schemes and things they're going to see. They've got a veteran guy in there taking it off his plate, allowing Fernando to get comfortable in there. And that was probably a huge priority for him. To your point, if they are going to draft the number one overall, if they are going to play him right away, which everything signals they're going to, this is that sort of move where we want to make sure that we've got a guy in there who's communicating clearly to our offensive line what their jobs are and helping to protect our quarterback so he's not getting killed out there. I think that's the other piece of this equation is Baltimore's not in that position. Lamar can handle all of that now. He's played for a long time in this league. For the Raiders, they see greater value in what that center can bring, especially a veteran center, one playing at such a high level. So, look, there might be some people who disagree with this, but I'm going to flat out say it. Sometimes your weakest offensive lineman is your center. And the reason why that is because he is always getting some sort of help from either one of the guards or the way you could scheme things up to help him out. And that's one of those things where we always talk about tackles being on islands. One of the reasons why they're the most coveted and valued is because they're on the edge. There's often times where no matter what, like they're going to be one-on-one. And they've got to be able to go up against some of the most athletic freaks in the league that you've ever seen. And so, as you cut it down, that center for the most part is going to at least get a hand, going to at least get some of the presence there from one of those guards helping to kind of protect him. Even in bear fronts, he's subject to being bull rushed, but for the most part, there's different ways of being able to protect a center from being overmatched. Schematically speaking, there's ways of helping him out. So that might be another thing too, going back to the philosophical discussion of like who are you going to pay, how much are you going to pay him? Oftentimes you're saying, no, I want to pay the guys who are going to be the blind side for my quarterback going up against the toughest matchup, maybe we have on the field, and that tackle versus that edge rusher. So it could probably come down, I think, to those two things, one of them being just the difference between where the Raiders are at and where the Baltimore Ravens are at the quarterback spot.
I think both teams are in what would be considered to be a difficult position. I really do. I don't know that they definitively improved on either side. I think that Max Crosby that's a critical loss. I think Tyler Lindenbaum is a critical loss, and I don't know how to. I really don't know how to monitor or weigh them. Which one would be the bigger loss? I don't know. But I do think that their additions improved each other's teams. I just don't. Was the singular piece of adding Max Crosby the difference for Baltimore? I would say no. They need more. Is losing Tyler Lindenbaum, is that a bigger loss for Baltimore? And is that a bigger gain? It shores up this offensive line. It's a pretty decent offensive line in Las Vegas. But you're probably going to draft number one overall. I mean, you're going to draft Mendoza over number one overall. I just don't know. I don't know. I don't have high expectations for the Raiders, so I feel as though until we see this group that they've put together, which is an impressive group of free agents that they've put together. I just don't know. But I think the Ravens, we may see a new Ravens. I do say that. I will say that. I'm feeling as though we're going to see a different type of Ravens team this year, and it's not going to be, in my estimation, trending in the right direction.
So they were, I think it was their lowest sack total in 15 years. They couldn't get to the quarterback last year. And I think of all the edge rushers, whoever led them had 4.5 sacks. They couldn't generate any pressure on the quarterback last year. And they had all the injuries as well, too, on defense, which didn't help. So I look at it and I go, you definitely improved that side of the ball. You've taken a hit by, deciding to not retain Linderbaum when you could have easily given him the franchise tag, although the salary cap numbers and all that you would, want to look at. But to me, if we're going to decide between who made the right decision and who didn't here, the Ravens front offices are in the benefit of the doubt. I know that SpyTech, there's a lot of people that are really excited about SpyTech and everything that's going on there. It's also the same organization that hired Pete Carroll and traded for Geno Smith. They gave up a draft capital and I think $58 million to do so, and then he was gone. The Chip Kelly fiasco, all the things that we've seen, a lot of that's on SpyTech as well, too. So I look at it and I go, if Baltimore is willing to part and add Max Crosby, clearly I'm going to side with that's the organization that's got the reputation for making good moves, and it's a remain to be seen with the Raiders. That's the way I view it.
On John Spytek, or is it on Tom Brady? Or is it both?
I don't know. That's the thing. I don't know what Brady's involvement is there. If you listen to Jeremy Fowler, Brady just didn't want to trade Max Crosby to the Patriots because he didn't want to give Rabel Max Crosby. So I don't know how involved he is with the decision making. I would assume he's got got a lot of say in it, but Spytek's the guy who's getting all the credit, based on yesterday's signings.